director for the Center for Gender Equity. I started here in August. Before then, I worked as the coordinator for the Queer Resource Center at PCC Cascade, and then I also worked as the director of the Women's Resource Center. Center for Gender Equity, just in case folks don't know, who has been to the Center for Gender Equity, like physically gone there? Great, 3 of us, awesome. Anybody in the chat? Yeah, no. So it's moved to Scott Hall 127. Hi, welcome. And it's a really lovely lounge space now. So I know in the past it hasn't necessarily been a space where people come and hang out, but we have coffee, tea, good snacks, condoms, menstrual hygiene products. It's a great place to hold a student club meeting. It's a great place to just do your homework or eat your lunch. So we encourage folks to stop by Scott Hall 127. The Center for Gender Equity offers a lot of different things. So we have 3 main components of our program. Hi, welcome, welcome. We do LGBTQ education and events, just like the one that I'm about to give right now. Gender and Sexuality 101 workshops, which Joey also, lovely, gives a ton of these presentations over on campus. We host a queer prom, we have drag shows. We also assist with people if they need to change their name or if they want to report an incident of bias. I have not, but the staff before me was advocating for gender inclusive housing and then also restrooms all over campus. We actually have a map on our website now if you need it. We also do Rainbow Continuum, which is a social group for LGBTQ plus folks and allies that meets Wednesdays at 7 p.m. in the CGE, and then Lavender Graduation. The first one ever was last year. This year it'll be in person in this very room. We're gonna have a brunch on May 11th. And so it's a great chance to celebrate LGBTQ students who will have a chance to come up and have people say wonderful, lovely things about them. And if you're graduating and are queer or trans, please sign up. We also have the interpersonal violence education and support. We have the Confidential Advocacy Network. There are only about 6 of us on campus that are actually confidential. And so all faculty and staff are mandated to report incidents of sexual violence or domestic violence if you disclose to them. But with us, we can keep that confidential and chat with you about your options. We have a peer health education class that I teach in the spring that teaches folks to do the consent workshops, like the sex and pizza that a lot of you probably had to go through, and athletic workshops. We also have Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We're planning a bunch of stuff like the Consent Color Run and Denim Day. And then we have an Gender Equity Committee, which does events like Women's History Month, Pay Equity Day, Human Body Canvas, which is also actually going to be in this room this Saturday, which we're really excited about. Human Body Canvas is where students strip down and there is an artist and the students are literally a canvas. And so they paint and then they are on display and the artist and the canvas describe what that experience is like for them. So it's a really empowering event for everyone who comes. And I encourage you to come if you can at 7 p.m. And then also doing the Love Your Body Week and advocating for things like free menstrual products on campus, pregnancy tests, that kind of thing. So some community agreements I like to set whenever we're talking about things that can be potentially sensitive or intense for folks. Gender and sexuality can be triggers for folks. I like to set some community agreements, assuming good intentions, right? So someone might say or say the wrong word, do something that's unintentionally harmful. We're just gonna assume that that person is not trying to harm other people, right? If they repeatedly do that thing, right, we might need to ask them to leave. But at the beginning, and it's something I haven't actually noticed here on campus at all. People are very kind and gracious, and they try to educate in a very respectful way. When I worked at PSU, it's a little more intense, and people, if you slip up with a word or a phrase or a look, even sometimes, people will yell at you, right? And so I started this rule then, but here it hasn't been as much of an issue. Ask questions, right? That's why we're here. Take care of yourself. So if you're feeling triggered, if you're feeling overwhelmed, do what you need to do. You don't have to ask for a bathroom break or anything. When you know better, do better. So hopefully you'll learn something from this workshop and take that with you and make better choices. And then participate as you're able. So whatever that looks like for you, this discussion will be super awkward if I'm just up here like yammering at you, right? So if you can participate, that would be great. Are there any other community agreements that folks think we should add? Okay. So goals for our time today. I'd like for us to identify our unearned privileges, analyze how cissexism and heterosexist privilege show up at work, and practice identifying and interrupting microaggressions. So when I talk about identifying unearned privileges, this is not an overview of a privilege and oppression 101 workshop. We don't have the time to go into every single privilege someone might have or every single oppression someone might have. We're focusing today on cisgender and heterosexual privilege. So as I'm using these terms, I'd love for us to define a few things. So can someone give me the definition of what cisgender means? Yes.
It means you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth.
Excellent. Yes. So you're born. A doctor looks at your genitalia and says you are a boy or a girl based on your genitalia. Some people agree with that. Some people do not. So if you're cisgender, basically you agree with what the doctor assigned you. Transgender. Someone want to give me a definition? Go ahead, Joey.
When you are simultaneous birth, you no longer identify with that gender.
Great, yes. So transgender can be a broad umbrella term, right? It can mean a lot of different things, but essentially, yes, you do not identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. So who wants to go through the acronym? What does L stand for? Lesbians. So lesbians are, what are lesbians? Yeah, genetically, yeah. So we're starting to steer away from terms like genetically, biologically, anything like that, right? So people who identify as women, right? People who identify as women who are romantically, sexually attracted to other people who are women. G, gay. What's gay mean?
Men who are attracted to men.
Yes, it could mean men who are attracted to men. What else could it mean? Yes.
An umbrella term.
An umbrella term. Yeah, for anyone who's on that queer continuum. How about B? What does B stand for? Bisexual. What does bisexual mean?
Attracted to two or more genders.
Yes. So bisexual for some folks means, yes, I'm attracted to men and women. Bisexual for some folks means I'm attracted to people of my same gender and people of other genders. So it just depends on what definition. How about T? We just talked about it. Transgender, yay. Q. Queer. Yeah, what does queer mean? Yes, Joe.
Queer is an umbrella term for anybody who experiences any type of attraction outside of that.
Brilliant. Yes. Queer is definitely based on like location and age. So older folks, I've noticed, when I say older, I mean folks 15 above, still kind of cringe at the word queer because it was used so negatively against them. And when I was living in the Midwest, the word queer, people would look at me like I had two heads when I said it. So it was not a normal, commonplace word and was considered still very derogatory. Okay, so the plus stands for all of these other definitions. We have I, which is intersex, A, which can mean ally or asexual, P, the two P's can stand for pansexual, polyamorous. G can be genderqueer, 2S means two-spirit, and there's like 50 more, right? Okay, defining heterosexism. What does heterosexism mean? You want to be brave? Try. You can just guess. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good guess, actually. No, I like that you broke down the words. It actually means the idea that heterosexuality is normal and natural, and it's the way that everyone should be. And anyone outside of that is considered deviant, abnormal, sick. And so heterosexism can show up in lots of different ways. We're going to talk about that. But that's essentially what it means, is that heterosexuality is the only way to be, the best way to be. What about cissexism? Yes.
Cisgender is that understanding very similar to heterosexism, that like there are only two genders and that's the right way to be, and everyone is followed the strict binary categories.
Great. Yes. Okay, so when we're thinking about work, and you can just talk about life too, what are some examples of heterosexual privilege? Yeah.
But there's typically always a female and a male restroom in the building.
Yeah, yeah. So gender inclusive restrooms might fall more on the cis end of things, right? Because it's about gender identity. But yes, absolutely. Yes.
It could look like maternity leave.
Maternity leave. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So instead of using more of a broad term like parental leave, right? Regardless of who is giving birth and who you're partnered with, we still use terms like, yeah, maternity leave. What else? Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. I think that can be true for lots of different cultures, ethnicities, also identity. So yeah, I think when you're thinking about gender presentation, and maybe somebody who was assigned female at birth, but likes to wear more masculine clothing, right? Shops in the men's section, wears their hair short. That could be seen as gender deviant, right? And unprofessional, depending on where you're at. The same can be true for like if you're at a private school and you have to wear a uniform, you have to wear a skirt, right? It's that same idea. Yeah, that's a great one. A few years back at, I think, a Beaverton High School, a male teacher was being threatened to be fired because he was talking about his wedding planning to his male partner. And lots of parents were saying it was inappropriate, right, for him to discuss that. But would the same thing happen, right? Say if you had a heterosexual woman or man talking about their wedding plans, their vacations, and their home and their family, right? It's very normal for teachers to talk about that stuff. So as a heterosexual person at work, I don't have to worry if I come out So that just literally means talking about my life, right? Talking about my partner, talking about dating or love interest. I don't have to worry that I won't be promoted, that I'll be ostracized, ignored, or even fired. Technically, there is a federal protection as of 2020. So it happened so late. So now you cannot be fired based on your sexual orientation. But you know, we know that these things still happen, right? People find other ways. But yeah, once people come out, sometimes people think of you differently and they treat you differently. I don't have to worry that my coworkers, travel mates, and supervisors will be comfortable with my sexual orientation. When I talk about my heterosexuality, such a joke or talking about relationships, I will not be accused of pushing my sexual orientation onto others, right? As a heterosexual person, I don't have to worry about the fear that my family, friends, or workplace finds out about my sexual orientation. There will be economic, emotional, or physical consequences, right? Coming out, depending on your workplace, can be very scary. Yeah, not only can have economic consequences, but you could be physically harmed. I will not be accused of being abused, deviant, or confused because of my sexual orientation. So this happens a lot, or even well-meaning people will assume or ask if someone has been abused or if you're confused because you are gay or bi. I am not asked to speak on behalf of all heterosexuals or expected to do unpaid training or emotional labor about the heterosexual experience for my workplace. This also happens a lot. Again, well-meaning supervisors who are trying to make the workplace more inclusive, but end up, yeah, expecting labor. And this happens to all kinds of minoritized folks. I can go home from meetings and conversations without being fearful, being attacked, being outnumbered, unheard, stereotyped, or fearful because of my sexual orientation. I know that my company health insurance plan will include my partner. If I have to travel for work, I don't worry about that the state or country might be unwelcoming or dangerous for me based on my sexual orientation. I don't have to worry about introducing my partner to my coworkers or bringing them to social functions. My gender expression is not challenged because of my sexual orientation. I'm not identified by my heterosexuality. If I have a bad week, day, or year, I need not ask if each negative experience or situation had something to do with heterosexism or discrimination. I can be sure that there's representation of my sexual orientation in my workplace trainings and videos, in management and supervisors, and in colleagues. So I'd love for you to just, with your table, discuss some of those examples. And yeah, I guess maybe write in the chat box for folks that are at home. What are some thoughts? What are some things that maybe you hadn't considered? And if you identify as queer or trans, you know, maybe talking about anything that resonates with you that you feel like you identified with. I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, what are some things your group discussed? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I mentioned that like EDA is definitely like seen as more unacceptable with the queer couple. I mentioned that like when I was in high school in my music ensemble, we were sitting in the audience for another performance, and I had my head on my girlfriend's shoulder, and I directed like that's not appropriate, don't do that. And then there was another couple in the audience who was heterosexual and part of our ensemble that like had their arm on each other and had one hand on their cousin's lap. And then like he didn't even say anything about it. So.
That's a great example, right, of the double standard and the over-sexualization that can happen to a lot of queer and trans folks. Like any kind of representation that you, yes, are outside of what is considered normal, is considered, yeah, like pornography or something, right? Like it's so extreme. It's like you're putting your sexuality on display, when, yeah, heterosexual people will do that, and sometimes a whole lot more, and people don't blink twice. Yeah, great. And that can happen, like people can internalize that too, right? I've dated people where they don't want me to hold their hand in front of their parents, right? Or yeah, if we're at a work function that I have to like remain like they're, like they're my colleague instead of my partner. And that expectation or assumption would be the same, yeah, for heterosexual folks. Any other thoughts? Did you all have anything? No? Okay. Okay, what are some examples of cisgender privilege at work? I think the bathrooms, yes, you brought up a really good point, of just being able to go pee and not have to think about it. What are some other examples? Huh.
The expectation of like Miss or Mr. when people refer to you, and like you will automatically, a lot of the times that like my practice side people will misgender me because they're trying to be more professional about it.
Yeah, the Mr. or Miss thing is a problem. I think especially because people are trying to be respectful, right? Like that's the intention of it, but it actually ends up being, incredibly disrespectful, to assume someone's gender, and that even that they want to be approached in that way or are spoken to in that way, right? Yeah, I don't necessarily want to be called Mrs., right? Either. So yeah, that's a great example. What else? Yes.
With like insurance covering like hormone surgeries and then taking them off for like that.
Yeah. So most health insurance companies, which we can argue is like life-saving care, for a lot of trans folks, will not cover things like hormones, any kind of surgery. People have to pay for those things out of pocket. They're very expensive, and often take, quite a bit of time to recover from. So you have to save up a bunch of PTO as well as money. Often it involves travel. So as a cisgender person, my validity as a person is not based upon how much surgery I've had or how accurately other people view my gender. People don't continually ask me what my real name is. The medical establishment does not serve as a gatekeeper, denying my self-determination of what happens to my body, nor requiring me to undergo extensive psychological evaluation in order to receive basic medical care. If I tell people about my gender, I don't have to hear the, oh, so you've had the surgery, or so you're really a incorrect sex or gender. I never have to worry about or wonder what to put down on legal or official forms when they ask for sex or gender. If someone mistakes my gender, it rarely will continue to a point of an argument. A simple assertion of my gender will generally be enough to convince the other person. I don't have to worry about whether I will be able to find a bathroom to use. I can expect my government-issued identification to accurately represent who I am. My identification does not. I expect to be able to remedy this quickly and easily without added expense, undue delay, arbitrary criteria, or a necessity to present evidence or medical documents. I can talk about my past experiences in gendered activities like Girl Boy Scouts or sports without unnecessary confusion or lengthy expectations. My pronouns are always respected and used correctly. I'm not asked to explain politics, pop culture, media, or medical issues about cisgender people. I am not asked to train my colleagues, supervisors, and human resource departments on cisgender oppression for free, regardless of my job description. Okay, So what are some thoughts maybe folks had about those privileges? Is there something you'd never considered before, maybe as a cisgender person? Yeah.
I think it's definitely interesting that things that I can see with many of my parents, like even though they mean well and they don't necessarily offend anyone, they'll say things where I'm like, oh, that's not right. Probably shouldn't say that. Or especially with the thing where it's like my house, I can be like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, like whatever. Where or using pronouns like they, them. Like my parents are like, wait, hold on, I'm confused. And I'm like, it's already stuff I'm talking about. But I understand how that's sometimes hard, but even though it seems so simple, it's just a teeny bit of extra effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's part of that cissexism or heterosexism is like, I don't want to have to try or do anything extra, right? Like, you're the one that's different. Yeah. Mhm. What else? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. No. So everyone should have gotten this handout on Zoom. So this is levels of attitude towards people who are queer and trans. On one section, we have homophobic, transphobic, or heterosexist. On the other, we have positive and affirming. People they might go back and forth, right, on these descriptions. We all know people in different varying points of this. So the first one is repulsion, right? And we see this in terms of people who see homosexuality or gender variance as a crime against nature, that people who are queer or trans are sick, they're crazy, immoral, they're sinful, and you should do whatever you need to do to change that, right? Prison, hospitalization, or behavioral therapy. So you have people who are sending their kids to reparative therapy, right? They would fit into this. People who pity queer and trans folks. They see them as more mature and preferred, that any possibility of becoming straight should be reinforced, or people can't help it if they were born that way. I see love the sin or hate the sin, right, in this group. Tolerance is that people are just in a phase of adolescent development and that they'll grow out of it, that they're less mature, and that people should be protected. They should not be given positions of authority because they're still working through their adolescent behaviors. And acceptance, right? And so this is where I see a lot of folks kind of get stuck, is the idea that you have to accept a queer or trans person, right? And that you even have the power to do so. And so things like the colorblind, but attitude, but put it on queer and trans folks. So you're not gay to me, you're just a person. What you do in your bed is your own business, or that's fine as long as you don't flaunt it, right? And so flaunting it is like literally just saying like, I have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? It denies the social and political realities faced by people who are queer and the pain of invisibility and the stress of closeted behaviors, right? It's really stressful to be in the closet. Moving towards positive and affirming, we have people who are supportive, right? This is many liberal and social political organizations, people who work to safeguard the rights of queer folks. They may be uncomfortable, but they're aware of the social climate. And they think that discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation is wrong. people who admire folks. They're truly willing to look at themselves and their own homophobic attitudes. Appreciation, where people see folks who are LGBTQ as valid part of human diversity. They're continuously working on homophobic and transphobic attitudes. They educate others. And then nurturance are folks that really take care of queer and trans folks, right? That really love and support them no matter what. I had a friend who was an old boss, actually. And when the Pulse shooting happened, I got a text from her almost immediately when it hit the news and said, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Right? And to me, that was like, not only thinking outside of herself, but understanding that like that might be a really sensitive or emotional time for me. So yeah, I'd love for you to just look at this and maybe if you are someone who is straight, you know, thinking about where you might fall on this line, and maybe thinking about folks in your life like that are close to you. Where does your best friend, where does your partner, where do your parents, right? Where do they all fall on this continuum? So go ahead and talk amongst yourselves. But any thoughts you have? Okay, let's come back together. What are some thoughts folks have? Yes.
I have a roommate who is straight, but I think she definitely falls in the appreciation category. Because like we've had a lot she always listens when I want to have like talk about like the nuances of what being trans is like. And like she's always very adamant. She's like, I am never gonna know what it's like to be non-binary, but doesn't mean like I don't understand like that how much that means to me, like to you, to me. And she's always just very like supportive and like willing to listen and like really like values like it's a positive part of like my identity.
Yeah, so it sounds like someone who really like genuinely cares about you. Yeah. Yeah, and all of you. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you. You can just rip it, just do it. How about other folks?
As a straight cisgender person, like I used to really try my best to be as good of an ally as I can, but sometimes it's like it was definitely hard for me to look at the positive and more encouraging, but okay, where am I? Because I don't really know. Like I definitely try to be as supportive as possible to people that I do know that are my friends and my family members, but you know, I don't know their perspective and I don't know how they think I'm doing. So I think that that's, I put myself in admiration, but I don't know where they would put me.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I think it might change from person to person, right? Like you might have a closer, deeper connection with somebody. And you do feel comfortable maybe standing up for them or arguing with your parents about them versus someone else in your life. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Any other thoughts? This can be a good tool to show. I mean, I wouldn't give it to someone who's like in repulsion stage, perhaps, but you know, someone who's like on that tolerance or acceptance level, being like, so this is what's happening right now. This is where I would love for you to be, right? Or like, this is my experience, and this is why it's harmful or hurtful to me. So if you are queer or trans, maybe you can use this. Okay. The next section is, I think we're just talking about, oh yeah, we'll watch video. Great. Human rights campaign, I know, but this is a good video. Do we have sound? Yeah, might not. So okay, we're gonna move on. So there, if you do want to see this video, you can just Google transgender inclusion in the workplace, transitioning at work. The Human Rights Campaign actually has a pretty good series of like people interviewing their experiences or talking about their experiences. Okay, so let's go. Yeah, so I just want to add this. Sometimes what I see is that well-intentioned, especially like liberal folks, will want to be really inclusive at work and will lower expectations for different groups of people. So they'll let people of a certain race be late all the time, right? Or not turn in their work. They'll let people of a certain gender, wear clothing that they would not let maybe cisgender people wear because they're like, oh, well, they have a harder time, they have a harder life, whatever, right? When you lower those expectations and standards, it's still a form of heterosexism. It's still a form of racism. So people need to wear work appropriate clothing, right? And so sometimes when you transition, sometimes clothing can be an obstacle. Sometimes it can be frustrating to find the kind of clothing that you want to wear that like matches your gender identity. Places like the CGE are a great place for students to turn to, right? So that they can get those resources. Scheduling, right? Like, don't give someone priority scheduling. Don't give people preferential treatment, right? Because you're going to cause resentment between the staff. And that's going to make things also really hard for that person, right? You're not doing them any favors. Same with workload. People also need to be civil and have a good attitude and be respectful in a work environment, regardless of their race, regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity. That's not to say that if people are experiencing bias, right, that they should speak up about that. But I've just seen a lot of circumstances where let's just hold everyone accountable in the same way. Okay. So, microaggression. Tell me what a microaggression is. This is an activity that I want you to do. Oh, I forgot to staple these. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. This is an activity you need to do with a partner. So folks that are sitting alone want to join the table or you can join, I don't know. So again, so what is a microaggression? Anybody know? No? Yes.
Microaggression is a form of discrimination that is oftentimes unintentional, that is done to other people, that are seen as small things, but oh, it was just like a passing comment, but it means a lot to the person behavior.
Yes. So typically they are, it's language that's used, right? It can also be kind of those heterosexist practices like not having a bathroom, although you could describe that as outright discrimination, could be seen as a microaggression. Things like you only have male and female, right, on a medical form when you fill it out. That could be a microaggression. So sometimes it's a lack of inclusion and sometimes it's just outright negative words or language. Yeah, they can be seen as not a big deal, right? But when you experience it 50 times a day, right, that oppression starts to really wear on you. Also, sometimes when microaggressions happen, you don't know if that person is safe or not, right? They might do or say something that is like a red flag to you of like, oh my gosh, can I not be out to this person or should I not be around this person, even if that person isn't trying to be harmful. So what I'd like you to do so I gave an example. There's a theme, right? Themes, the statement, what the message or issue, like what is the problem with this statement? And then what are some maybe ally statements or better language we can use? So an example would be people saying that bisexual women are more likely to cheat or that gay men are very promiscuous. So again, if you know your history, right, some people might not, but it was very specific propaganda in the 70s and 80s to make LGBTQ people seem sexually deviant, right, so that we could be lumped with people like pedophiles, right, or other sexual behavior that's illegal and immoral, and to keep queer and trans folks away from children or the workplace or whatever, right, and not give them rights. And so when you hypersexualize a group of people, right, it's degrading, it's demeaning, and it's not accurate, right? Not all bisexual women are one thing, not all gay men are one thing. So yeah, I'd love for you to work as a team or as a pair and go through each of these different scenarios. Write what the message or the issue you think is the problem, and then what some better language or an ally statement you can use. And then hopefully we'll have time to review them. So go ahead and get started. Huh? Your pencil or pen, do you have any? I don't have an extra pencil or pen.
I might create or something. We'll see.
Like, hey, that's kind of a double standard, like you wouldn't make that comment. And then just being like, hey, like I don't think, or like you're gonna have.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. Sorry. I could put the video link in the chat. So.
It's like
Again, like, it's got in the propaganda of that, homosexual people are not true.
I think it's
Kind of they're like, oh, like,
we have lots of.
I think really all you do that would be like, that's not true.
We'll just say
It's like,
she's very interested in my.
they're not exceptional people. But it's not it's missing. It's really just not right. From you, someone you don't I know we got this, and I see it's a lot of people with Western like
Okay, 4, gendered language. What did folks come up with? What's the issue here? Yes.
like when people leaves out everyone outside the gender binary.
Yep. Okay. And what can we do instead?
We talk about using gender neutral terms like hi everybody, or like hey folks, how are we doing?
Yes.
Or just instead of like using like niche or like oh hi.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Hi friends. Any other? Hey y'all. Do people come up with other words you can use? Great. Yes. Yes. Excellent. Okay. Invalidation of identity. What's the issue here? What's that? It can refer to PDA. Is that what you're talking about? Okay, yeah, it can be. It can refer to PDA. What else?
It's kind of talking about how like they're basically like the concept of it is that like they don't want to like see it around their person, because they're not really fine with it. And it's also talking about like double standards of like when talking about like
Yeah.
double standards of like, oh, it's cute and fine when a straight couple does it, but when a weird couple does it, then it's perverse.
Yes, great. What about the two, you're not asexual, you just haven't found the right person, or you don't look or sound gay, or you're so pretty for a lesbian? What's the issue there? Yeah. Yeah, so you don't actually exist because you haven't met the right person. Yep. Or you don't exist in the way in my mind a queer or trans person looks or sounds. And so, yeah, you don't exist. What are some things we can say instead of that, or do instead of those words? Yes.
You don't have to add qualifiers. Or like oh, you can just say that someone's very pretty. You don't like, oh, for a lesbian, you're really pretty. Or like you don't look and sound gay. Like that's not something that's said. Because they are just a person. And regardless of what stereotypical expectations you might have of them because of their sexual identity, that is not their job to like fill that role.
Yeah. Yes. Great. Anything else? Okay. What about stereotypes? So who is the man or the woman who wears the pants? Yes. And that's harmful for straight relationships too, right? Like those kind of gender stereotypes of who wears the pants means who has control, right? Of the relationship. And ideally, no one person does not have control over another person in a relationship. Yeah. What about, you don't even look trans? I wouldn't have known you were trans if you didn't tell me. Yeah.
It's a great idea that there's only one way to see a certain gender, so like there's only one way to pick a woman and be a woman. And if you do that, then
You're a good little trans person. Okay. Yes, you're a good little trans person. Also, there's a derogatory undertone to that, right? It's that same thing of like, you are so pretty for a lesbian, lesbians aren't pretty, right? You don't look like a trans person, trans people look different, right? There's this assumption there. And then what about this group is for women and self-identified women? Yes.
It's basically saying that like, we're not recognizing trans women as women, but we can't like outwardly say that.
Mhm.
It's like saying that, yeah, women and self-identified women, they feel like you're not really women, but you can be here anyways.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's basically like kind of like undermining the
Yeah.
the separate category of not.
Yes, exactly. You can pretend. Yeah. If you really, really have to separate out, right, and be distinctive, you can say cis and trans, right? But just really think about why you feel the need to do that, right? Is there a reason we're separating out and being explicit? Sometimes it's important in queer and trans spaces, or especially queer spaces or feminist spaces, to be really explicit because trans women and trans men haven't been welcomed in those spaces, right? They've been run out of those spaces, or there's a lot of microaggressions that happen. And so it is important to be explicit and say trans folks are welcome here. But for the most part, yeah.
So would it be like a lot more acceptable to be, instead of doing both of those, just be like this group is for anyone who identifies as a woman, and then that is not really like saying like women and then these people, like, so would that be okay to say that?
You could, yeah, you could. I think we're also moving away, and I realized that I did it earlier, from using language around identifies as, right? And just like people are, they are women, they are men, they are non-binary, right? They don't identify that way. So I would even just say all women are welcome here. And so hopefully that would be enough coding, right? That like trans women would be able to read that, and then cis women would probably not even notice it. Yeah. But that's something that you could definitely consult with like the CGE about, right? And we can bring it to staff meeting and be like, what do you all think, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. Our time is up. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your time and your engagement.